Hello guys, this is going to be the second session for the muscles for the leg and the thigh, the lower limb. And later on we're going to be working with the back muscles. Remember, we will be working with these names for your lab practical. We already worked with the gluteus maximus, gluteus medius, and gluteus minimus in the previous video. We're going to be working now with the thigh and the leg muscles. And here we have the lower limb. This is the left lower limb. We have here all of the phases, all of the views for the lower limb. And first of all, we're going to be working with the thigh. Actually, I'm going to make a closer view here. And we have to divide the thigh in three compartments. We have the first compartment, which is the adductors of the thigh, adductors. It's getting away the lower limb from the midline. Then we have the second compartment, which is anterior as well, and it's the quads. It's the quadriceps femoris, and we have four muscles here, and it's for extension. And the last group we have here in the thigh is posterior, and this is for flexion. We're gonna be studying these muscles in a second. This last group, posterior for flexion of the knee, it's called the hamstring. Then the first muscle we're gonna be talking about is the pectineus. And remember, this first compartment is the adductor compartment, and then we have the pectineus muscle here. This is this one, and we have several views of these muscles. They are inserted in the pectineal line or femur, and again the function is going to be for adduction and flex the thigh at the hip joint. In this part of the video, we can see the function when it's turned to orange. It's contracting, then it's useful for adduction, adduction. The next muscle we have from this group is the Adductor Longus. We're going to be working with the Adductor Longus, which is again for adduction of the thigh at the hip joint. And we're going to isolate this muscle. We can see here the front view or anterior view, then the lateral view, and then the posterior view. We can see this muscle working, contracting this muscle, and it's going to be for flexion of the hip or for adduction of the hip. In this view, we can see the next muscle. If we take off the Adductor Longus, we have here in orange, we have the Adductor Magnus, and we're going to isolate this muscle. This is the Adductor Magnus. This is the anterior view. Then we have the lateral view and the posterior view. We're going to, again, we're going to see this muscle in isolation. This is the Adductor Magnus. And the action again is going to be the adduction of the lower limb. In this part of the video, we can see the adduction of the lower limb and the function of the Adductor Magnus. Other muscle taking off the Adductor Longus is this one, which is the Adductor Brevis, and it's going to be as well for this group, which is the adduction of the lower limb. We're going to see this muscle working with the hip adduction, and it's going to be this way. And finally, from this group, we have these long muscle, the inward, the midline of the thigh. It's called Gracilis. And again, it's going to be working with the adduction of the hip. And here we can see it working during the contraction. Now we need to work with the second compartment, which is the anterior compartment, and this is the quad muscle. And we have here four muscles: the rectus femoris, vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, and vastus intermedius. Then the first muscle, the anterior muscle for the quads, is going to be the rectus femoris, and it's located anteriorly. It's the first muscle. This is the anterior view of the muscle. Then we have the lateral view and the posterior view of the rectus femoris. This muscle is the anterior part of the quads, or the quadriceps femoris. Here we can see the extension of the knee, which is its function, the extension of the knee. If we cut this muscle, the rectus femoris, then we're going to have here three more muscles. They are the vastus intermedius, the vastus medialis, and the vastus lateralis. And these four muscles are the quadriceps femoris. Then we can see here the anterior view of the vastus the central one, which is the vastus intermedius. This is the lateral view, and then we have the posterior view of the vastus intermedius. All of them are working with the extension of the knee. Always extension of the knee. They're going to be working these three muscles with the extension of the knee. And then we have the posterior region, and we have these three muscles. We have the hamstring group, and these ones are for the flexion of the knee. The first one is going to be the biceps femoris, and we have the long head and the short head of the biceps femoris. And then we have the semi-tendinosus, and then we have the semi-membranosus. All of them are for flexion of the knee. Again, we have the biceps femoris, the semi-tendinosus, and semi-membranosus. And for movement, we can see here they are for flexion of the knee. All of them are working for flexion of the knee. Then we have the lower limb, and we're going to be talking about two more muscles, about the Sartorius and the tensor of the fascia latae, and they are anteriorly. The Sartorius is the longest muscle in our body, and it's useful for flexing and medially rotates the knee at the joint. We're going to be working its function now. It's going to be the flexion of the hip and the knee. And then this other muscle, it's laterally. This is the tensor of the fascia latae, and this is useful for assisting the medial rotation, adduction, and flexion of the thigh at the hip joint. It's laterally. It's located here. Actually, if we're going to isolate the muscle, this is the anterior view, the lateral view, and the posterior view, and it's really attached to this connective tissue, which is the fascia latae. And we're going to be working with this muscle. This is going to be the function, and we can see another function for this muscle. And we were working with the muscles of the thigh. Again, we were working with Sartorius, tensor of the fascia lata. We were working with the adductors, quadriceps, and the hamstring group, which is the flexion of the knee, extension of the knee, and abduction of the hip joint.